Speaker, I think it's a pleasure to take a call on the Appropriation 2013-14 Supplementary Estimates Bill and Imprest Supply Bill. And I want to say this, that we on this side of the House, we look forward to the change of government in September this year, because the people of New Zealand, especially those in the regions, are looking for a positive message and are looking for positive change in the days and the months and the years that follow September this year. You see, this government is in a desperate bid to sell a myth to New Zealand that average wages have gone up under this government. They've done it in the little, quite extensive piece of publicity material that have gone around to households, and this is what they say. They say, our growing economy is creating more jobs and is seeing average wages rise faster than inflation. A proposition that so far every National Party speaker on this debate and just about every other has failed to substantiate. Cannot justify it, cannot explain it, and for one very simple reason, it's not true. It is not true. They cannot sustain it. If it was correct, of course, that under this government, magically, wages inflate themselves and people feel better off, then you have to wonder why it is that Bill English in January this year, after 5 years of a national government seeing no real change in the back pockets of working New Zealanders, he stood up and he had to say in January this year that Kiwis should expect pay rises this year after years of belt tightening. And he went on to say a lot of households will be looking for benefits through more job security, which they haven't had, and through pay rises, which households haven't had much of through the last 3 or 4 years. So yeah, he said, they have a right to expect some of the benefits. That's what Bill English said. Well, he didn't say that today in his contribution to this debate. What he has done today in question time and in the debate is peddle an OECD report that is 3 years out of date. That's the best the National Party can come up with. Information 3 years out of date, but it hasn't stopped. Jonathan Young raises a good point. It only came out last week, which is the reason why this government's been desperate to peddle it, and I hope everybody doesn't notice the date which it closed off on, which was 3 years ago, because of course that report doesn't take account of a number of very important facts. The fact that last year 46% of New Zealanders did not get a pay rise. Funnily enough, they say, the National Party says average pay rises have gone up. They actually claim that it's 3.2%. It isn't. But 46% of New Zealanders didn't get a pay rise last year. Now that must mean that there are some people getting whacking great pay rises, and of course they are. It's around about the top 1%, maybe the top 1.5%. But it's not ordinary working New Zealanders who are now 6 years on after this government looking around and asking, where is their fair share? Where is their fair share, Mr. Speaker? They may well ask, because they ain't going to get much from this government if it carries on much longer. So we have this myth being peddled that average wages are increasing. It gets worse than that. There are some more, the thinking members of the National Party know that they cannot possibly justify that. So Simon O'Connor and Maggie Barry, and it is the virtue of being a backbencher, is you can actually depart from what the ministers are saying, because you're not saddled with cabinet responsibility, and the thinking backbenchers, and I have to say sadly, there's only a few of them, but Maggie Barry and Simon O'Connor may well rate amongst them, and so that rather than look at the historical record, they try and look ahead and do crystal ball gazing. We've had a bit of that in the Parliament this afternoon. But anyway, they've looked ahead and they've said, oh, listen, don't worry, New Zealand. Don't worry, working New Zealanders. It's all right, because look, your pay is on average going to go up $7,600 in the next 4 years. And nobody believes them. Nobody believes them, because it hasn't happened in the last 4 years. It's not going to happen in the next 4 years. Things are going to get worse, because every piece of employment law that this government has passed has been about making it harder and tougher for hard-working New Zealanders to get a better deal. And they still have laws on their books. Their majority was found guilty in court a few weeks ago, so the employment law had to go out. It was put on ice till after the election, because their majority got found guilty and he left Parliament. But this government still has it on their books. They still have on their books law changes that will make it a lot harder for good, hard-working New Zealanders to get a decent pay rise. And so they know in their heart of hearts, the thinking backbenchers on the National Party, even though they try to peddle that myth, they know in their heart of hearts, no hard-working New Zealanders, certainly not the two-thirds who earn less than the average wage, are going to be getting a $7,600 pay increase over the next 4 years. That's absurd, and they know it. It's not going to happen, because there is nothing in this bill or in this government's plans that is going to do anything to, across the board, improve the lives and the value for working New Zealanders. They will continue to suffer, and they've had enough. And they've had enough, which is why they have rapidly gone off this government. They've rapidly gone off this government. And that's why this government has to use figures that are 3 years out of date. That's why some have to look to figures that cannot be justified, trying to predict what's going to happen 4 years hence. And that is the pity of it. And so we have 46% of wage and salary earners who cannot get a pay rise, and we have a private sector survey come out just yesterday. MP for New Plymouth, Jonathan Young, says to me, about the OECD report, well, it only came out last week. Its figures are 3 years out of date. But the private sector survey of New Zealand employers was as current as last month, and it came out yesterday, and it was very telling. So just as the government's own figures tell us that 46% of workers cannot get a pay rise in the last year, this survey says 49% of employers say they do not expect to give their workers a pay increase this year. So the figures more or less line up. The figures match up. Welcome to New Zealand today. If you're a hard-working Kiwi and you're not in the top 10% or the top 20%, you are going to struggle to get a pay rise. OK if you're in a union, OK if you're covered by the Remuneration Authority, which we all are, of course, but if you're a hard-working New Zealander and you're doing your bit, you're doing your bit to help your boss, you're raising the nation's productivity, don't bother asking for a pay rise, because the employers have already told the surveyors they're not giving it to you. And this government doesn't care. This government does not care that at a time when, according to David Bennett, the economy has grown by 3.8% up to March this year, 3.8% in the year to March this year, David Bennett said. And why would David Bennett, man, he's been in this house a long time, he knows his figures, why would we balk at it? But half of New Zealanders cannot get a pay rise. That is the crying shame of New Zealand today. That is the crying shame of this government. And Paul Hutchinson might look mournfully at me. I know that he thinks it's an appalling indictment on the government he's about to depart from. But the truth is that half of working New Zealanders cannot get a decent pay rise. And that's what the surveys are telling us, and that's what workers are telling us. Simon O'Connor and Maggie Barry's attempts to try and cajole people into believing that it's all jammed tomorrow isn't going to work. What New Zealanders need is a change. And they need a government that is serious about making sure that working New Zealanders share in the benefits of a growing economy, not what we have at the moment, which is concentrating ever greater wealth in the top 1%. That's what the National Party stands for. And New Zealanders are looking for a government committed to the regions. Not like this government with Taranaki, which for the third successive year the GDP per capita has fallen because this government is not concerned about investment in the regions. They'll turn up there, minister after minister, and cheer on all the things that they have absolutely no responsibility for, but the minute it starts turning to custard, they are out of there. And so when 250 highly skilled engineering jobs went out in New Plymouth in the first 4 months of this year, you didn't hear a beam from this government, any representative of it. And when more than 100 public sector jobs have been sucked out of Taranaki in the last 3 years, you haven't heard a thing from any member opposite, because they don't care about the regions. And when you've got one of the most dangerous public and most utilised roads in the form of State Highway 3 North in the country, and it is now killing people, you don't hear anything from the government opposite about more investment needed to upgrade that road and make it safe for the travelling public. This government has forgotten about working people. It doesn't care about them, and it doesn't care about the regions, and there is nothing in this bill that is going to make a blind bit of difference to it, and nothing that New Zealanders hear on the election campaign this year they will hear from this government will mean anything for workers and for the regions in this country, which is why people are desperately keen for a change.
The last national call is a split call. Do you want to